There, and to discuss that and all of the week's politics, I'm joined by our panel. It is small but well formed. Our third panellist had to pull out this morning because of a family emergency, but luckily we have here Newshub's political editor Jenna Lynch. Welcome.
Morena.
And director at Franks Ogilvy Law, Bridget Morton. Welcome
Morena.
to you. I want to quickly dive into something that Finn was talking about there. 200k spent by Labor in the past 90 days on its social. It seems like a lot. Do you think that's a lot, Jenna?
It is a heck of a lot of money for Labor to be spending. Interesting as well because the National Party has really picked up its social media game. There's a lot more content going out from National across Instagram, and they've even started a TikTok account, I think. So maybe in response to seeing more of that from National, but also those disastrous poll results that they've been seeing surely have spurred on a bit of the spending.
Yeah, well, we're supposed to be tightening our belts, but not them, Bridget.
Not them. I think also it's really interesting to contrast that to the lead up to the last election, where proportionally Labor spent much less because they got that organic reach, mostly through the Prime Minister's popularity. Clearly that's not happening right now, so they're having to tip money in rather than just relying on just people sharing it out of pure love of the PM.
It's an interesting turning point, perhaps. I want to talk about Grant Robertson now and his interview with Simon Shepherd just now. He keeps saying that the recession is just a forecast. It's not a certainty, but the Reserve Bank says it is engineering a recession. So we seem to have two sort of counter forces. Who is right, do you think, Bridget?
I don't think that anyone's going to be absolutely right. What I picked up from that interview was actually that the Minister of Finance is quite tone deaf as to what is happening out there on the ground. I think, trying to push down expectations and say it's not so much of a worry that a recession could happen doesn't reflect what people are feeling. This week, everyone I spoke to was concerned about what's happening next year, even if they've got a mortgage or not. It's just what is going to be happening across our economy. To say if those sort of jovial moments from the Minister of Finance there, him not taking any responsibility whatsoever for the government's spending or role in this, indicates to me that he doesn't understand what the pain is that people are already feeling.
It's interesting, isn't it, Jenna, because I heard shallow recession from Grant Robertson there, and that doesn't actually come as much comfort to people, a shallow recession, does it? That's a narrative building kind of exercise, isn't it?
I think it's kind of an interesting framing that he's going for, and it's an interesting strategy that he's going for. I think trying to tell people that there's not going to be a recession when the Reserve Bank governor says there is, why not manage expectations? And hey, if you manage to stop a recession, well done, Finance Minister. If he's telling people that he can head it off, as we were talking about before, and he doesn't manage to do that, that's a failure.
Yeah, absolutely. And for most of the year, we have heard from Grant Robertson, actually, that this is something that is happening overseas. It is not something that he can control, and it's largely due to overseas factors. But now it seems that we're getting some empathy from him, and maybe more of a reckoning for him at the end of the year. What do you think, Bridget?
Yeah, I don't think so at all. I don't think he is all taking that reckoning. He's really defending all of the spending, and he's going back to, some of the key things that there was bipartisan support for, say, with the wage subsidy, and trying to gloss over, them using the COVID fund for things like cameras on fishing boats, and a lot of wasted spending. We had the piece this week about how much has been spent in the mental health with not a single new acute bed. That kind of spending is actually the wasteful spending that is, in part responsible for the situation we're in now without getting the outcomes we need.
Well, we heard from the Reserve Bank Governor, Adrian Orr, at that select committee this week, Jenna, that the Reserve Bank, he admitted that the Reserve Bank had printed too much money. He said yes. Do we need an inquiry?
I think the government would probably argue that while there are all these calls for an inquiry from the opposition, the government will probably argue that there doesn't need to be inquiry while they're still in the middle of this crisis. So probably they'll argue that it can be covered by the COVID inquiry that they're planning to do. They're planning to do possibly a royal commission into the whole COVID crisis. So I think they're planning to probably shelve it into that one rather than do a specific inquiry into the Reserve Bank.
And what did you think about those comments from Orr this week? Because he was using fear, wasn't he, really, with Kiwis, that we should stop pushing for pay rises and tighten our belts, curb our spending before Christmas.
I think the wage increase is a really dangerous space for Robertson, because at the moment he's facing a lot of calls from particularly the unions to get some of those pay sector increases. So teachers are currently on the table, the tertiary sector, you've got nurses calling out for further support, but he can't really actually provide. He has to show restraint, I think, in those wage negotiations, because they've got that danger of that wage price spiral that's just going to increase inflation and embed it even further.
I want to switch sides now, I suppose, to National was also taking notice of the financial information delivered by Adrian Orr this week, and National was going to review its tax policy. He's had to swallow a dead rat here, hasn't he, Luxon? But better to do it now than perhaps at the start of an election year?
Yeah, I think it was probably a convenient excuse to do it right now. National has been kind of softening its language on dropping that 39% tax rate for some time, and they were waiting for the right opportunity. So what was a pretty rotten Christmas present for everyone else was kind of quite gleeful for the National Party. I think they got to get something off the books that was just politically unpopular, cutting taxes for the top 2% of earners in the middle of a cost of living crisis while the people at the bottom are doing it tough was never going to be a vote winner. Labor was smashing them about with this stick, you know, tax cuts for the wealthy, and they've just taken that stick right out of their hands. So quite convenient for them, I think.
Some flip-flopping again, though, from Christopher Luxon, or U-turning, or a policy donut. These are terms which are quickly becoming associated with his leadership. He needs to ditch them quickly as we move into next year, doesn't he, Bridget?
I think absolutely they have to go on with certain policies, but I wouldn't say that this was a flip-flop. Building on what Jenna said, you know, you have seen a softening around it. They have been reading not just the accounts, but also the room about whether or not this is something people want. A key part of, I think, National's platform for next year is about being responsible fiscal managers, and they have put it onto the table that they're willing to make the hard decisions, which they had to do this week. It is a hard decision to make, but you're not seeing that reflected from the government in terms of them saying, actually, we're prepared to say that we're not going to deliver on some of the things we promised because we don't think it's sustainable anymore to do so.
Unfortunately, though, for National and for Christopher Luxon, it was coming off the back of a week where he was flipping around the clean car standard or the clean car discount, or couldn't quite figure out his policy on that. So the narrative was able to be built by the government that he was in this constant state of U-turn. And he does need to be quite careful, I think, if he's going to make promises, to stick to them, because then it becomes a trust issue for voters. If he is going to do a little bit of this flip-flopping, it's like, what can we believe that you are putting on the table?
Yeah, and voters are still getting to know Christopher Luxon, aren't they? So that trust is still building. It's really crucial for him, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And I think the way that the government has framed it against him this week is that instead of, recognising that they were always going to drop this policy, that they're saying that they've just seen these accounts and they're panicking and they're dropping policy like flies. So it opens them up to that attack line as well.
Yeah, I suppose it shuts down, though, the Liz Luxon attack line. So you win some, you lose some.
Very conveniently.
Absolutely. I want to talk briefly about Sandringham, because we know that the Prime Minister is heading there this morning. There was a fatal stabbing of a dairy worker in her electorate this week, and she came in for some criticism for not going immediately to see them, heading off to the Chatham Islands, Jenna.
Yeah, so I think the ACT Party jumped in and criticised her for doing that. I think trying to reschedule a visit to the Chatham Islands is a little bit difficult, to be fair to her, but she is heading there today to see the community. This is not only as Prime Minister, but obviously it's in her local electorate, in her local neighbourhood as well. Just an indicator of the current crime issue that the government is facing.
Yeah, and she needs to get out there, doesn't she? She needs to get out there and to take the temperature of her own electorate on this issue.
Yeah, but I think also this is a flip-flop actually from her, because it wasn't that she just said earlier in the week, I've got this Chatham Islands, a very important sort of visit to do before I can actually get there. What she said was that it would be inappropriate to be there, that it would be intervening in a police investigation. She seems to have gotten, of course, her, appearances following the mosque attacks or White Island when she had that in mind. So I think the pressure is actually shown that she could no longer hide from the high crime stats. And we saw from that Hamilton West story about just how bad people are feeling on the ground about crime at the moment.
Yeah, it is going to be a top issue heading into election year next year. I want to touch briefly reporting on the Make It 16 campaign. A very smart young group of 16-year-olds got a reprieve from the Supreme Court this week, Bridget, on whether or not they should be able to vote.
Yeah, I do think it's been a bit misreported, mostly by the Greens Party. They've pushed this narrative that the Supreme Court has found that this is unjustified discrimination. But what they actually found was that the Crown didn't make the case enough for that justification. So that doesn't mean that it's always going to be discriminatory to not allow 16 and 17-year-olds to vote. I think the problem they have is that just at this time, given all these issues we've just been talking about, it is one of the lowest priorities for most people. And frankly, I would like to see more resources go into getting that next level of people up to vote, 18 to 24-year-olds who have a low turnout now, low engagement in the political system, get them involved, spend our resources there before we go on sort of this flight of fancy.
Jenna, I want to ask you, you know, the right say that this will favour the left, and that is, you know, National and ACT are not for this policy. Labor says it is supportive, or Jacinda Ardern does anyway. But it may have, will it have any influence on the party vote?
Yeah, I think so. So the right's argument is that it would younger voters tend to
120,000 of them, though?
I don't know whether it would have the impact that the right-leaning parties are playing it up to have. But either way, this thing is doomed to fail, right? So you have to have a 75% majority in Parliament to pass it. ACT and National aren't supporting it, so it's done for. But what's interesting is whether they take it to the local body elections. So the government would only need its whopping majority to get that through. Yeah. So they might look at changing the law in that space, use it as kind of a training wheels scenario.
Kick it to touch for a little while. Give it to see what impact it has on local politics.
Yeah, that's right.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us on our panel this morning, Jenna Lynch and Bridget Morton.